Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Grate Conversations with me, your host, Dr. Tangie. I know I've been gone for a while. Let me just give you a little quick update. So, it's not quite the summertime, it's the springtime. And usually, how my podcast recording schedule works is every Friday that I'm off, I record in the evening time. Well, now that the World Traveler Tangie series of places that I'm going has kicked off, I literally have a trip planned from now until August, at least one weekend out the month where I'm gone. So that kind of threw off my recording schedule. So I need to kind of figure out what that's going to look like going forward because I'm still going to be outside. But I don't want me being outside to delay me chatting with you because I love this. It's fun. And I feel like I'm really finding my stride. So excuse me while I get it together. But of course, I've never been afraid to be seen trying or trying something new. And that's kind of what this podcast is about. So anyway, we're going to do something a little bit different today, which is why I kind of snuck it in last episode if you didn't listen to why I want to do a name change to the podcast and call it Great Insights because I want to leave room to talk about pop culture topics from a different lens. And there's something that came up that me and Anthony have been talking about. And I don't know if you heard about it, but this is the situation that happened at Tim Hortons coffee shop where an elderly lady lost her life. And I think it's a perfect example to show that the world really needs to be more regulated. And the purpose of this episode is not to victim blame or to point fingers at you did something wrong. I think it's a tragic thing. Nobody should ever go into a public establishment and lose their life. It's just sad, and that's it. However, I believe that if we want to all learn how to live well and live better, regulating yourself, knowing how to manage your stress, knowing how to manage when you're triggered is really important, which is why I came up with this method called the smile method, right? And at first, I thought the smile method was just something that was supposed to be used to match each phase of your menstrual cycle. But truly, it really is a stress management technique. And the goal is that if you're struggling with a certain area, that your whatever phase of your menstrual cycle in has that superpower to be able to help you with that. So SMILE is an acronym. It stands for support, movement, intentional pause, liberation, and ease. And you might be thinking, Tange, what does this SMILE method, what does this stress management technique have anything to do with the Tim Hortons situation and the elderly lady losing her life? Well, personally, I think that what two of the women, because it was women that are involved in this situation, really could have benefited from intentional pause when it comes to self-regulation. A lot of the times we are talking about managing our triggers and not how to calm down and self-regulating, but I think we forget about sometimes disengaging, which I said that I've been saying that word a lot, it keeps on coming up, but taking a step back and pausing is so important. And that's why I included that in the intentional pause. And when we are on our menstrual cycle, like actually on our period, that is the best time to practice intentional pause. And I believe in this situation, if both of the parties would have took some time to intentionally pause and step back and take a break, that the situation would have ended differently. And specifically in this situation, there's two parts of the sides. I want to show how there were two ladies. I believe there was one lady that was the younger barista. We'll call her barista. And then we'll call the other person the actual manager. And then we have the elderly lady that lost her life. And if you saw the video, which if you type in TikTok, Tim Horton elderly woman, you can find the clip. I watched the full video. It was very disturbing to me. I really do believe that when situations like this happen, it is a little, like a small thing that happened that kind of wraps up all the different issues that we're going through in America. And as someone who is actually a community pharmacist, I deal with the public every single day. So I'm not talking about this as somebody who just has an opinion about it. I'm talking about as someone who is in a managerial position, deals with unwell people, deals with disgruntled people every single day. And I've actually been in a situation like this. Of course, it wasn't dealing with coffee, it was dealing with people's medications. Because if you're new here, I'm a community pharmacist. I won't say what company I work for, but I've been in the exact situation. Actually, I've been in more heated situations like this. And every single time, I have been able to de escalate and regulate my emotions. One, because it's my superpower, but two, I always remember to take a deep breath and do intentional pause. And I believe if intentional pausing, if self regulation is something that you have a problem with, the best time to practice it is when you're on your period because you really don't feel like being bothered anyway. And that is the perfect time to just take a beat and just think about it. And so when I think about that Tim Hortons situation, I think about, if you're watching the video, you can see there's a point in time where if the lady comes in and it seems like she's upset about whatever she's upset about because there's no audio, at that point, when you realize that if you're that person in that situation, if you're the young person, that the person is yelling, the only thing to do in situations like that is to, what I like to say is, this conversation is no longer productive. I'm going to go ahead and remove myself and just step away. And I think it's it sounds like it's so simple, but when you're heated, when you're upset, it is really hard to do. And I have learned that sometimes the best thing to do is to say nothing. And then even as a person who's in charge, and it takes time, you're 20, like that's what they say, the person is 20. I don't know for sure, but you're 20, you don't really know what to do in that situation. And I keep on hearing both sides of the story, like people should not be yelling and getting so upset. And we're going to get to that point about the other elderly lady that lost her life. But I think another thing that comes up is two different generations and their expectations about what another person should put up with and what they should be able to do. And in this day and age, I feel like when it comes to respecting your elders, like I'm a millennial, I'm 34. There are some things that some of the elderly women come in and do. And could I correct them? Could I tell them you're wrong and stuff like that? For sure. But I don't under the guise of respecting your elders. And I feel like anyone who's under the age of 25, that whole shift has changed. And sometimes I feel like it's changed for the better in some sense. But I think it's like, I think boomers and Gen Zers are very similar because both have to be right all the time and both can't just let the other person have it, for a lack of a better word. They don't know how to be like, you know what, I'm going to just let you have it. They both have to like just prove themselves right and have a point to prove. And I noticed that a lot with a lot of my Gen Z technicians and the elderly people, they have a really hard time communicating with them. It's like it really is a struggle. And I think that that is the bigger picture that we're seeing all the time. Or a big thing about respect in the, like, that's a really big thing for boomers. And I was raised by a boomer. My mom talks about this all the time. And so when we think about tone of voice, cultural things, the elderly lady that passed away, she was a Black woman. The other person was white. So all of that plays a role too. Like there's a part in the video where you can see the elderly Black person like coming closer. And I think that was the perfect time for the manager to really practice intentional pause and step back, like actually step back and just move yourself further back from the situation. And that's what I would have done. Actually, that's what I do. Whenever somebody is at up here and I can't get them to calm down, I just stop talking. and I just back away and I remove my team, especially if it's happening with one of the team members. I always say, hey, let them go away and move back. And even I take a moment to step back. But when I was talking to my husband about it, they were saying how if you work in customer service, you have the bias saying that maybe this person looks like they were doing everything to help this person and the person is still upset. And sometimes that happens, but tone and how you say what you're saying does matter. And I haven't heard too many people talking about that. Like, if someone comes in and they're complaining about their order being wrong, and maybe they ordered it wrong, maybe they don't understand how the new system works, and you know that they're wrong, it's a difference between saying, well, that's your fault. You got it wrong. I can't do nothing about that. What you want me to do? Versus saying, okay, let's come up with a solution to how to help you. You know? And I can say from my own experience, some Gen Z workers, not all, do not have that soft skill of being able to still be firm but not be disrespectful. And sometimes older people do take being firm with being disrespectful, but that slight inflection in your voice, that reminding them that, hey, I'm on your side. I'm really not trying to fight with you. I want us to get to the same end result. As the person who was the barista, will say, who initially was getting into it with the older person, that would have been a perfect time, again, just to end the conversation. I think that it could have been ended. And if the other younger person who was like 17, they said, if she wasn't able to end it, then the other manager person should have just went ahead and ended the conversation. It shouldn't have been no more talking. Everybody, she should have removed the younger person, told her to go to the back, and she should have stepped back. It shouldn't have been anything of where they had that barrier like between them. No one should have been close to that barrier. Everyone should have been back. That's what I do when situations get heated in the pharmacy. I don't even allow myself to get close to the person. I'm always constantly stepping back. And also, something else that I do, which it used to get on my nerves, but my dad did it to me all the time. My parents are not really big yellers. My dad's not a yeller at all. But what he would do is he would lower his tone of voice and he would start talking really slow. And that's how I knew when I pissed my dad off. But he don't get high. He don't start yelling. And sometimes when you lower your tone of voice and you start talking in shorter sentences, like, let's calm down. There's nothing else I can do to help you. I think you need to leave. Okay? Nothing's happening. I'm going to remove myself from this conversation. You see how my voice is low? I'm going to remove myself because it's no longer productive. I can't help you. I'm going to go ahead and walk away now. And that is very hard to do. That takes practice. I'm not saying that's easy. Remember, I've been a pharmacist for 10 plus years. I've had a lot of practice. But every single time when I felt like a situation has gotten out of control and I didn't de-escalate it, it's because I was feeling like I had to get the last word in. I had to be right. Or I just didn't stop talking. Like sometimes you just got to stop talking. You just got to be quiet. And it doesn't make you feel weak. It doesn't mean that that person was right, but to protect yourself in that situation, I believe mum's the word. Now, when it comes to the elderly lady who again died tragically, please do not miss what I'm saying. I am not saying that it wasn't a tragic thing. However, I do believe that some boomers, some elderly people, because they are older, they feel like that gives them the right to do whatever they need to do. And so at no point in time, no matter what, is it okay to touch anyone? Which is why I said that the other person that was the manager, there's a point in the video where you can see that she's trying to get the other person to back up, or maybe she was coming closer. At that time, the other manager should have continued to back up. That's why I always be like, when you're trying to regulate, you can't be close to the person that is rah, rah, rah. You got to back up. You got to back up. You should have been further back. There was that counter, because you can see people come from the back at the end of the video. You got to back all the way up and let that person come close. And then you could tell them to back up. And that way, if you feel like you need to put your hand out to be like, hey, back up, you can do that without being in someone's personal space. Because you got to think about it. If you're an older person and you're already on fight because the adrenaline is rushing, cortisol is rushing through this older lady's body, as soon as that touch happened, I believe she felt threatened. I mean, you can see that she felt threatened because after that, it was a little push a muff. And then next thing you know, the lady punched the other girl in the face. And we know how the video ends. They start to fight. And I feel like as an older person, there's a difference between saying, hey, you got my order wrong, let's fix it, versus irate and yelling and pointing. I don't know what she was saying, but anytime someone is doing this as a Black woman, you're not just saying, hey, my order is wrong. That's kind of not how mannerisms work for Black people most of the time. And so I find that it is easier to get your point across when you calm down. So the only thing I would correct for the older lady is before she went in there, I'm not saying she shouldn't have corrected it, because I don't know how rude the person was to her ahead of time. We don't know that information. All we know is that there was a grievance. She felt deeply wronged and she felt like she needed to go in there and say about it. And when I see that elderly person, I think about how my mom handles situation when she feels like she's mistreated, and she always keeps her voice low. She's not disrespectful, but you could tell that she's very stern and she's upset. You can tell. She has this look about her. You could tell she's upset, but she's not yelling. And I hate the fact that she didn't practice intentional pause, and the smile method didn't exist for her, for women of that age, to actually just take a beat and see if it's worth it. Like, not to minimize, the death, but it's like we're raising our blood pressure. We're getting stressed out over coffee, you know? And like, and I'm not saying it's just coffee, but we can replace coffee with something else. We're getting stressed out over somebody not getting our order right and we're yelling at them. We're getting stressed out about hearing, because really what it's truly about is I told you something that you didn't like to hear. And now I'm dysregulated and I'm yelling. Both sides, the barista coffee people, the workers at Tim Hortons, and the lady. That's really what it is. You said something that I didn't like and now I'm dysregulated. When really, that's the perfect time to take a break and take an intentional pause and stop talking. And I feel like if the elderly lady would have, before she went in there, sat in her car, took a deep breath, maybe before she started to yell, took a step back, took a deep breath, and really thought about what she wanted. Because it's like, when you went in there, what was the goal of what you wanted? Did you want your coffee order to be right? Or did you need to let the person know that they treated you poorly and you just wanted them to know that? And I've had situations where, I'll give an example, that it really could have went left. So a lady came through the drive-through and she asked me to explain her medication. And I read what the directions said on the medication back to her, not to really so I can understand. I didn't see what it is. And I was like, okay, it says take this daily. So 72 hours mean 3 days. You're going to take one now, take one in the 3 days. My mom calls it background noise. She was having her own background noise that she took it as me rereading what the directions said as being disrespectful, like trying to talk to her like she was slow. And then she felt the need to park her car, come into the pharmacy, and proceed to tell me that I was treating her poorly and whatever. And she was upset about it. And the first thing I did is I said, hey, I apologize. That wasn't my intent. I reread the directions to you because that's how I'm trained. And I just repeated them back so I can make sure that you understand what I said. Since you asked me the question, it wasn't me trying to be disrespectful. And then sometimes if I'm regulated enough, I will say, like, how would you have liked me to talk to you better? Like, what's another way I can do it better? And usually once I say that if the person is in their right mind, which 90% of the time they can reflect and be like, you know what? Nothing. And then she ended up having to apologize to me because turned out her mom had just passed away and she was having a hard time. And whatever I said triggered her in a way to where, and then after come, I said, well, you know what? That's sad. I would be walking around dysregulated too if my mom passed away. But that took me taking a moment to pause and not really, hopefully my mic. Okay, we good. Hopefully, not hopefully. It took my taking a beat and calming down and always thinking about it's not personal. And that's really what allows you to be able to take that intentional pause, especially if you work in customer service. Because I'm really making this and talking about this for the younger people who work in customer service, is that we have to realize that it's not personal, and the customers, it's not personal. You know what I'm saying? It may feel personal because this world makes everything feel like someone's out to get you, but it's not personal. And taking that intentional pause, and I keep on saying intentional pause, because I really believe that that could have saved that woman's life. Taking a beat, either the cashier, well, I don't know if she's cashier, either the Tim Hortons workers and the elderly lady, the elderly lady would have practiced the smile method, because guess what? You don't have to be a menstruator. You can be past menstruating and still practice the smile method. Again, the smile method is particularly for women because we have superpowers in our menstruation cycle that help us with different stress management techniques. However, you don't have to have a menstrual cycle to practice intentional pausing and being quiet and actually thinking about, what am I trying to do? What is the purpose of what I'm doing? Why am I even really this upset? Is this really about the coffee? These are all questions that she could have asked, but I don't think she had the capacity to even ask those questions to calm down because she was just so dysregulated. And even the workers, they didn't have those either. And so that's just another perspective on it. I don't want to dwell too much on it because, again, it was a sad thing, but I feel like it's something that we can all learn from, because we could have been either of those people. We could have been the customer and we could have been the worker. And I know definitely I've been the worker because I always have to practice regulating my emotions every single day. But if we all just take a moment to just take a deep breath, close our eyes and pause, we can go ahead and live our lives. So that is it. I hope you enjoyed this new type of thing the episode is. That's really why I wanted to again change the name to Grate Insights, because I want the podcast to shift into more practical ways of how to use the smile method. And it really deserves longer form content than just like, if you follow me on Instagram and TikTok, I do like 30-second videos, but there's so many things that pop into my head like, oh, the person could have used the smile method in this scenario. And so this is one situation that happened in pop culture that I feel like they could have both used some intentional pausing, and it really could have saved the lady's life. So I hope you enjoyed. Oh, we can't forget one great thing that I am loving this month. I don't know if you noticed, but this twist out looks super good. And this is thanks to the Dew products. I'm going to shout out the Bonita Alpha Balm Cream and also the Mousse Def Mousse. That's what got these results. Day one here, I literally just took this down. And one question, of course, that I want to leave you with to help you live well is think about what is something in your life that you need to take an intentional pause on. Is it a relationship? Do you need to intentionally pause before you say something you regret? What is it? And I want you to practice this week. Before you say anything, I just want you to be like, you know what? Let me just pause. Let me set that and see how regulated you feel. Of course, I love you. Remember, living well doesn't happen by accident. I'll see you next week.